7-letter word rhymes with carob. Well, what brings you to our humble abode on this cold and windy morning, Inspector Gregson?
I'm certain it's not for Mrs. Hudson's tea and crumpets.
Likely not.
It's murder, gentlemen. A very troubling murder.
How unfortunate. Please, tell me everything.
The chief accountant for the Bank of England, Oswald Mason, was found murdered at his home at 10 o'clock last evening by his wife. He seems to have been a simple, hard-working man, and on the surface there seems to be no motive.
Well, what about the Yard? I can't believe Scotland Yard has exhausted all its resources. Why are they turning to me?
I am here at the request of the Exchequer. It seems that Mr. Mason was doing some important work for the Treasury, and the Chancellor wants to make sure that this gentleman's death has nothing to do with the work he was involved in.
Have you any evidence that the murder is related to the Treasury matter?
No. I tried to convince the Chancellor that unless some new evidence turns up, it looks as if Mason's death was just another commonplace murder that the Yard can solve.
Holmes always says there's nothing so unnatural as the commonplace.
You learn well, Watson. Ah! Yes. And as soon as I finish this vexatious crossword puzzle, I shall look into the matter.
Hello and welcome to the optimal playthrough of The Banker's Final Debt. And we are expected to solve this case in 9 moves. And for 8 of them, we can link them fairly easily. But for the 9th one, it is a little bit of a leap of faith. Not as bad as a couple of cases have been before. So, we have learnt about Oswald Mason's murder, and that there are no obvious motives. And we've also learnt about links to the Treasury. So, our first visit will be to the Treasury.
Sir Adrian, we are investigating the murder of Oswald Mason.
Capable fellow. Bloody inconvenient, this murder.
Inconvenient?
Mason was to have a report for me, dealing with some rather embarrassing irregularities.
Do you feel that his death might have anything to do with his work here at the Treasury?
Well, the investigation was dealing with some rather large sums of money. But a murder, it doesn't make any sense. It won't stop the investigation, only delay it. Besides, all of Mason's papers were accounted for.
What was the nature of Mr. Mason's investigation?
Well, as you know, the Exchequer is responsible for the financial well-being of the empire. We've relied on Bacon & Company to handle many of our investments. Do you know them?
They are one of the largest investment houses in London.
Yes. And 6 months ago, it came to our attention that they are in deep financial straits. They are not in possession of sufficient liquid assets to meet their current liabilities. They had invested in too many securities that were weighing down the London stock market. So, Her Majesty's government and Lionel Foxcroft, the governor of the Bank of England, guaranteed to cover the discredited securities. But when we audited their books, we discovered they had invested in far more securities than they were reporting. Over £1,300,000 worth.
So Mr. Mason was attempting to trace the additional securities?
Exactly.
Have you any idea who is doing the embezzling?
There's little doubt that Bacon & Company's directors, Michael Essex and Mitchell York, were hoping to profit while England slept.
I think that we have learnt all that we can about the links with the Treasury. All the papers were accounted for, and even if someone involved did kill him, it would not stop the investigation. But we also know that no one actually really knows he was involved. So, I don't think there is any further leads to follow down this way. Well, there isn't really. This case really does set you up for going down some rabbit holes. So, we can actually visit Oswald Mason's residence. So let's find out what we can from there.
Standing guard, Constable Parks?
Yes, sir, Mr. Holmes. Waiting for the Yard to make its final inspection, so I'm making certain everything stays just the way I found it last night.
Where was the body found?
Sprawled across the desk it was. You can see the blood stain on the top. The blighter put up quite a fight, I must say.
How was he killed?
Head was bashed in by a statue.
Is there any indication how the murderer got in?
Looks like the upstairs window. It showed signs of forced entry.
And it appears that this is where he exited. There's a palm print and plaster residue.
Yes, and there are pieces of plaster shards in a pile on the floor. Was it you who found the body, Constable?
No, it was his wife. She came home from her sister's and that's when she found him. I was on my nightly rounds and heard her screaming. Then I came in and I saw this mess. I covered up the stiff and promptly had him sent over to Bart's. Then I gathered up the man's papers and took them to the yard.
What about the murder weapon?
Oh yes, I had that sent over to Murray at the lab.
Where is Mrs. Mason now?
She was taken to her sister Dahlia's. Dahlia Farmer.
The things that we can take away from this is, firstly, that this was a breaking and entering. And it seems like the person who broke in was looking for something specific, as the room was trashed and there was plaster shards all over the floor. Now we know that, well, we know now that Oswald Mason was killed with a statue and his head was bashed in, and it's currently with Murray at the moment. The statue, not the head. And we also know that his wife is currently at his sister's. So the next logical choice would be to visit Dahlia Farmer.
We're terribly sorry about your loss, Mrs. Mason.
There, dear sister.
We know this may be difficult, but we need you to hear about last night's events if we're to catch your husband's killer.
Yes, I know. Well, I was here last night for her weekly whist game.
She comes every Thursday.
Oswald stayed home and worked on some papers from the office.
The man had been working very hard lately.
Was he expecting visitors while you were gone?
No, I don't think so. I returned home at 10 o'clock and went into the study and... You tell him, Dahlia.
The place was in shambles. Furniture overturned, books strewn about, and in the middle of it all was
My poor Oswald!
Ghastly. Who could possibly have wanted to hurt him?
I can't imagine. He was the dearest man in all the world. Why, only last week he bought me a Venus de Milo replica for our anniversary and promised me a special trip. I imagine it was Paris because we went there on a honeymoon where we saw the original Venus. When I saw that statue broken into pieces,
I think that's quite enough for one day, Dr. Watson.
Of course.
So we now know that there wasn't any visitors expected. And we also know now that the statue was a Venus de Milo replica. And we can pretty much say that the statue was targeted, as she's confirmed that it was smashed and we found the fragments, and it must be targeted as when the killer left through the window, he left plaster marks on the windowsill itself, and this would have happened after he murdered Mason. Well, as far as we know, it's a man. So for these leads, they're pretty much dried up in terms of the interviews, but if we go to the newspapers, I believe it is here. J. Small & Co. Ceramics and miniature replicas of the world's greatest statuary. Statuary. That was a very bad mispronunciation. So, let's go and visit J. Small & Co.
Mrs. Small, we are interested in obtaining information about the Venus de Milo statues that your company manufactures.
I must say that certainly has become quite a popular item lately.
We understand they're smashing.
That is precisely what a nice gentleman said when he came in on Wednesday. He didn't mention his name, but he did say that he had a shop in Southampton. He purchased our last 5 and wanted to know where he could get more. I told him the rest had been sold to other shops. He wanted their names, and so I gave them to him.
And who might they be? I wouldn't mind picking up one myself. I've always admired the Venus de Milo.
Evanson and Company and the gift shop at the British Museum.
How long have you manufactured these particular statues?
My late husband made up 15 of them 3 years ago, but he refused to sell them.
Late? So sorry. When did he die?
A fortnight ago.
Oh, my.
Don't lose any sleep over it, gentlemen. My husband was not a very reputable man. The only person who probably truly missed him after his death was the barman at the Red Bull Inn.
So now we know there are 15 of these statues, and they were made 3 years ago, and her husband refused to sell them. But now he's dead, she has sold them, and they have been very popular. They've been sold. We found out that they have been sold to Evanson and Co. and the British Museum, and a gentleman came in on Wednesday inquiring about them and bought the last 5 in her possession. And I believe she also mentioned to him about the shops. She mentioned to us as well. So let's go to Evanson and Co. and see what they can tell us.
We're investigating the murder of Mr. Oswald Mason.
I can assure you, you'll not find any murderers here, sir.
Good heavens, if it were only that simple. No, you see, among Mr. Mason's papers was a receipt from this shop dated 31 March. Do you have a record of what he purchased?
Well, let me see. Ah, here you are. Well, the man did have a sense of the popular. He purchased 2 Venus de Milo statues. It appears we delivered them both for him.
Might you tell me where they were sent?
One to Rose Mason at his home address. The other to a Mabel Brown on Tottenham. Oh, do you suppose he was having a dalliance?
At this time I'm not supposing anything. By the way, I do so adore the Venus de Milo. I might be interested in purchasing one of my own.
Sorry, haven't a one. Sold the last 3 to another gentleman on Wednesday.
Pity.
Perhaps I can get more from the manufacturer.
Who might that be?
J. Small and Company. Have you heard of them?
The name does sound familiar, but I'm not sure. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Billingsley. Good day.
And now we have learnt about the man who I assume is the same person who went to J. Small & Co. and bought their stock. He also bought the last 3 from Everson & Co. But 2 had been sold to Mason and Mabel Brown. Now with Mabel Brown, we only need to send the irregulars to find the information. And from here we have learnt that her statue is also broken. And if it goes to the newspapers, if the lady at the Evanson and Co. gift shop told the gentleman who she sold them to, then he would obviously know about Mason and Brown. But there's also this here in the newspaper about a break-in on Wednesday night. So this implies that she did not tell him who she sold them to, and that he was desperate to find out himself. So not only did he break in to this shop, he also broke into the Masons' household and also Mabel Brown's household. So this has to be the same gentleman who killed Mason. Anyway, the next lead we have is the British Museum, and we're already on this page.
Excuse me, I'm eager to see one of your Venus de Milo statues.
So sorry, sir, we sold out of them yesterday.
Do you have the names of the customers?
No, it was just one woman. She bought all 5. Said her name was Mrs. Smith. I am certain I've seen her on stage before, although not under that name. For the life of me, I can't remember what her real name is.
And for this, we need to go back to the newspapers. And you would be forgiven for trying Madame Neruda, as she is also a popular performer, so it seems. But the name we're looking for is Violet Blue. So let's give... Oh, and again, I'm on the same page.
She's not in, Governor.
I can see that, Mr. Kent. What a sight. What a pity to see so many lovely ladies. Turned to fragments and dust. The British Museum.
Well, she might be a bit untidy, but she is a woman of culture, she is.
Yes, I can see that. Do you know where I could find Miss Blue?
Left about 20 minutes ago with a young gent. In quite a hurry, I'd say. I was loading her luggage in the four-wheeler, and I heard the bloke tell the cabbie to head over to Waterloo Station.
Thanks, Alfie. Much obliged. Perhaps I'll hold on to these for evidence.
So we now know that Violet Blue is the accomplice of the gentleman who killed Mason, as she also inquired about the statues at the museum and bought all of them. And we've just found a whole load of smashed up statues in her room. Now, this is where we need to make a bit of a leap of faith. If we go back to the Times, again to April 11th, in the top here there is a entry called Errol, welcome home, Violet. Now we have to assume this is the same Violet, as I believe there is only one Violet in the directory. And if we go to H, there is an Errol Hawke. And unfortunately we can't actually look at this information, otherwise it will cost us a point. So we have to guess, where has he come home from? Some of the obvious answers would probably be he may have been involved with the shipping companies. But the answer is he was in prison. So this is the last key location we need to visit.
I'm sorry, but Nat Cook doesn't wish to see you. I hope you understand, but I can't force him.
That's quite all right. I wouldn't care to be responsible for causing the upset of a hardened criminal. Perhaps you can tell me a bit about him.
Nat Cook hasn't been a spot of trouble since he's been here. Keeps to himself, really. But it must make prison life a lot easier to take, knowing you've got £100,000 worth of diamonds waiting for you on the outside.
However did he come upon such incredible wealth?
The DeVries diamond robbery.
Oh, yes, I recall. They were never recovered. Do you suppose he confided their whereabouts to anyone?
Well, like I said, he didn't talk much. The only confidant he ever had was his cellmate, who was released on Monday.
And who might that be?
A fellow by the name of Errol Hawke. And you should have seen the lady friend he left with. Got all the guards' knickers in a knot, she did. Acted like they'd never seen a woman before. But she was a looker. And I heard tell she could sing like an angel.
And here we learn that Nat Cook was Errol Hawke's cellmate. And Nat Cook was involved with the DeVries DeVries diamond robbery. And the diamonds were never recovered, so they have to be somewhere. And that somewhere was probably told to Errol Hawke by Nat Cook, who has just been released from prison recently. And he left prison with a woman. And it seems like this man and woman have fled out of London. So we have enough evidence, I believe, to take this to court.
Hear ye, hear ye. The Queen's Court stands in order. A pleasure to see you. I understand you are here to solve the Oswald Mason murder case. Most vexing indeed. So tell me, who was the murderer? Please choose from either your notebook or the directory.
And we know now that it is indeed Errol Hawke.
Positively correct. Now tell the court, why did he do it?
It was not self-defense. I mean, he was breaking and entering. So I'm guessing that Mason did attack him, but that's not the answer. We know nothing about an affair. And yes, he definitely surprised Mason while attempting to steal the Venus.
How right you are! Now, what of Mason's work with the Treasury? What bearing did that have on this case?
The whole audit and links with the Treasury and his job was a complete, I wouldn't say a complete red herring, but it had no involvement whatsoever with this case. I believe there were no links between Mason, Hawke or Violet Blue whatsoever. It was just a breaking and entering that went badly wrong.
Quite so. Now tell us, what role did Violet Blue have in this crime?
She wasn't the one who stole the Venus. Well, firstly we know it was Errol Hawke and he did not steal it. He smashed it up. We know that Hawke and Blue left together. We don't really know anything much about the original theft of the De Vries diamonds, as this optimal playthrough neglects a lot of this information. This is the obvious choice.
Flawless deduction! Now tell us how Errol Hawke knew that Mrs. Rose Mason and Mrs. Mabel Brown were in possession of the Venus statues.
Now this information, it would probably make some sense if the proprietor gave him the information, but the fact that he broke into Everson and Company implies that she didn't, and when he broke in, he got their names from the register.
Very commendable detective work. You have done an exemplary job. The court is recessed. Until next time, of course.
An extremely difficult case, and your score is absolutely perfect. I'm quite sure we could not have done any better.
You already know my feelings by now about these ridiculously low scores that we need to achieve, but I guess it is what it is. Let's go and listen to the case solution.
Well, Holmes, here it is in this morning's Times. Murder solved, diamonds found, Hawke and famous singer arrested. They caught them just as they were boarding the boat for the continent.
It does surprise me that for once Lestrade acted so quickly. After I advised him I'd solved the murder, he rung up his contacts in Dover immediately. It was they who assisted us in closing the final chapter of this case.
Do unravel this one for me, will you, Holmes?
Well, I'm surprised you don't know all the details yourself. You were the one to discover many of the critical clues.
Perhaps, but you tell it so well.
Why, thank you, Watson. It goes like this. The minute Nat Cook heard of the death of his partner, Jonathan Small, he knew he needed to do something to protect the Venus statues from being sold or destroyed. So he confided in his cellmate, Errol Hawke, who was due to be released in 9 days.
How convenient to have a cellmate that was willing to assist him.
But whether or not Hawke planned to split the spoils with Cook, we don't know. We do know that he intended to share them with his lady friend, Miss Violet Blue. In any event, the day after Hawke was released, he went to J. Small and Company.
Only to find that only 5 of the original 15 statues remained. He purchased those 5 and learned from Mrs. Small where the others had been sold.
I thought I was telling this one, Watson.
Of course. So sorry.
No harm done. So, after Hawke and Violet broke the 5 statues into pieces in vain, Hawke devised a scheme to track down the others. His first stop was Evanson and Company gift shop, where he purchased the 3 Venus statues still in stock and learned that the other 2 had been sold. Unable to convince the shop manager to release the names of the other purchasers,
he broke into the shop that night and took down the names and addresses of Mrs. Oswald Mason and Mrs. Mabel Brown from the register.
Go ahead. You tell it, Watson.
Oh, no. Do continue, Holmes.
Fine. That evening, he entered the Mason home through the upstairs bedroom window. He encountered Oswald Mason in the study and a fight ensued. Then, with a swift blow to the head with a statue, not the Venus, he murdered Mr. Mason. He quickly broke open Mason's Venus, discovered that there were no diamonds, and heard the sound of Mrs. Mason returning home. He therefore made a fast retreat through the study window and went to Mabel Brown's straight away. Mercifully, he found no one at home. He located her facsimile of the Venus de Milo, smashed it there, and again he found he'd been foiled.
Then, the next morning, Hawk purchased the 5 pieces from the museum shop, hurried to Violet Blue's flat, and began demolishing the statues.
And as you've no doubt surmised, the diamonds were in the
Third of the 5 museum pieces.
You always have had a knack for mathematics, Watson.
Thank you, Holmes. Oh, so it would appear that Scotland Yard was correct in its conclusion that the murder was unrelated to Mr. Mason's treasury assignment.
Yes. Unfortunately, they missed the obvious fact that it was only the Venus for which the burglar had come.
Case closed, Holmes?
Unless you have something more to add, Watson?
Not a thing, Holmes. Crossword?
Yes.
Lovely, aren't they?
And there we have it. I will be back soon with the final case, and that is the Thames murders, which I am slightly dreading for the optimal playthrough. I guess we'll see what happens soon. Once again, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye bye.